ecology major in college. Studied butterflies and ants, and I was interested in whether the butterflies fed on different trees when they were caterpillars, if they were more attractive to the ants, which then would suck on them to get amino acids, and they would then be protected from wasps. So I was an ecologist. I went and I thought, I'm going to be an ecologist, and I started working for a professor, and I realized that A, I'm really allergic to poison ivy, and B, that it's really cool, but I didn't love it enough. And I was like, I'm really interested in how insects interact with their environment. And they're social insects. So social people interact with their environment. And I got a job at an environmental consulting company. And here I was a year and a half out of college, and I had never heard the word epidemiology before. And here I was at this environmental consulting company, and somebody asked me to calculate an odds ratio because I was really interested in statistics. I liked the fact that you could tell stories with numbers. You can argue with it, and you can take these numbers and you can make them tell a story. So she asked me to calculate an odds ratio, and I was too embarrassed to admit that I had no idea what an odds ratio was. And so I figured it out, and I realized I shouldn't know what an odds ratio was because I hadn't been an epidemiologist. And that's what, then I got really interested in environmental epidemiology. I went to school at Harvard, where I am now a professor. At that time, I wasn't ready to commit to being a doctoral student. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. But then I did my doctorate in epidemiology. That's how I got to environmental epidemiology. So from the very beginning. But I was always interested in how populations, because of my insect thing, right? And how the big populations interacted with their environment. And I realized that what I had been doing as an undergraduate was really a diet study. It's just like looking at nutritional epidemiology and and I was really interested in like where the, ants, the butterflies were in the greenhouse and if that made a difference. And it translated really well to environmental epi. So that's how I got into what I am doing now. Started out, my dissertation was on breast cancer, environmental risk factors in breast cancer in the nurses' health studies, which are large cohort studies in the United States. Low-level pollution, low-level exposures that are exposed by everyone, and what are the challenges of trying to tease those out. And the thing that's so cool about it is that they're ubiquitous. You have the challenges of dealing with low exposures versus high exposures. After I graduate, I will be completely honest with you, I am now known as an air pollution epidemiologist. I did not want to study air pollution. Harvard is known for its air pollution epidemiology, with the Harvard Six Cities study, with the exception though of the Harvard Six Cities study, the 1993 paper where they showed that mortality was associated with air pollution. Most of it was kind of more short-term exposures. And I was really interested in long-term exposures. So when I moved into my postdoc, I had this really neat opportunity to start a study in the trucking industry where we were looking at exposures to air pollution, which I didn't want to study in the first place, right? But exposures to air pollution and in truckers. And the thing that for me that was really interesting about that is it's important to look at occupational exposures because you want to make sure that the workers are healthy, but also you can take that information and you can extrapolate it to the general population, particularly in a study like truckers where they're driving on the roads that everybody else is driving on. That got me into air pollution. That's how it happened. Then there was an opportunity to look at residential addresses in the nurses' health studies and try to link air pollution to those addresses, because the nurses' health studies are followed up every 2 years by mailed questionnaire. So from 1976 forward, we knew where people lived every 2 years. The thing that's interesting is you can't do that so much anymore now. You can still do it, but it's harder because now we use computers to have people fill out questionnaires online. So we're not automatically getting their addresses. And so now we have to ask them for their addresses. With this, we were automatically getting their address. I got a grant to overlay air pollution exposures onto this residential history. Again, getting into the long-term exposures that I was really interested in. And so that's kind of where my research took off. I also got involved in the Harvard Six Cities study. And this is the study that I worked on when I was a postdoc, where we updated the original Harvard Six Cities study. And I call that my gravestone article because there was about 15 years at ISEE and other meetings where the graph from that study, which shows that as pollution decreases, so over time the pollution decreased, the risk of mortality in those cities decreased. That graph would be shown by multiple people at every talk. And so I would be like not paying attention and somebody would nudge me and be like, ah, there's your paper again. That paper is that graph is going to be engraved on my tombstone. That's kind of how I got into air pollution. I benefited from very good luck, I will have to say. When I'm advising younger students and they say, how did you get where you got? The Harvard Six City study was time to update it. And I had this opportunity. There was a grant to add air pollution to large cohort studies that I was able to take advantage of. But what was cool was I was able to take advantage of all of it. All of that is incredibly important. And I think that's, it's like finding your mentors, finding who you can work with, and going that next step. Like, what is the next thing that can be done? I also benefited a lot from having people I hired who then became my colleagues, who we were able to do teamwork together. And I think it's better recognized now than it was 20 years ago. But the fact that it takes a village to make a lot of this research happen, and people have different skills, and you bring them together and you can make a great product. Definitely people that I met at these meetings, inspired me to go into a certain direction. I was able to tap into them because I knew them, and I could say, hey, Veronica Vieira is somebody who I worked with very closely, and she has a specific statistical technique that she used to study clusters. And we published a number of things together. And I've also been able to introduce people to her. Mark Neuenhausen and the other people at IS Global are people that have been doing a lot of really cool things with green space and the environmental exposome. I might have met them otherwise, but the fact that I knew them and that that's what ISEE really gave to me. I mean, the other thing that ISEE did for me, gave me opportunities, and also moving into the leadership position. And I will say, to give people credit, is that Lucas Neese, he was my advisor as a student. He then ended up at EPA. He told me when I was a student it was my second meeting. It was in the Netherlands. So 1995. He said, you need to go to the business meeting. You need to go it was called the business meeting then. It became then the members meeting. And he said, you need to go to this. And many students did not go. Because I went to that, I got to see who the movers and shakers were at ISEE, and I got to be known by them. And here I was literally 2 years into my doctorate at that time. A lot of people think it's not for them. People that I trained who are now my colleagues, who I totally depend on, Jamie Hart and Peter James, who have also become quite active in the organization. It's a home, it's a community. I will say I thought that the meeting last year was really successful with other things that are happening with my family and stuff. I'm not as eager to travel all over the place. I mean, when I thought the meeting was going to be in China this year, I knew I wasn't going to be able to go. Now with it where it is, I can go virtually. ISEE has always been really cognizant of trying to make sure that people from underdeveloped countries or people with less money can try to get to the meetings. And the fact that we have meetings in different places around the world gives more opportunity to other people at different times to go. Yeah. Because I was always at these business meetings, people knew me. I had people like Lucas Neese, and I give him a lot of credit for it, and Doug Dockery and other people like that who introduced me to people. Is I knew a lot of the people who were counselors at the time. And so people thought of me when it came time to nominate. I was nominated for secretary treasurer. And I remember feeling very like, oh my God, why me? And then I won that because I had made myself known. I got that nomination and I became secretary treasurer. And it was at a time when the president was Dan Wartenberg, who recently passed away. He was incredible. He lived and breathed ISEE. He had been one of the original members. He had been counselor. He was a secretary treasurer before he was president. And he really taught me how to run an organization and what it was that was so important about ISEE. And then Tony McMichael was the next president during my course of being secretary treasurer. And he was a different kind of president because he was a big name person who didn't really know much about ISEE before he became president. So I really had to step in and do the president stuff while I was secretary treasurer, while he was president. And then the next president I stayed on while Dean Baker became president. He was somebody else who had been secretary treasurer for many years. And so this was this core group. These were the people that I saw as the leaders when I was a young person. And the fact that they're now all retiring and not part of it is like really freaky to me. And then I was nominated for president. And I remember I contemplated, should I do this or not? And my husband, I talked to him and he said, you should do this because this is one thing you really love. And I was really honored to be president and, and work with the people that I worked with as president. Over time, since when I was first involved, is there was no European chapter. And the North American chapter, we only, after a lot of struggle to start it, to be honest, we only just started it. We do have a policy committee that's quite active. We write letters. One of the big issues for the United States has been Trump's administration, obviously. Even before that, when I was president, there was this move in Congress to pass the Secret Science Act. They felt that you couldn't use any papers where all of the data were not publicly available. You couldn't use them in making regulation. And the problem is that takes out all of the environmental epi papers because we're concerned about participant privacy. I don't know. I was very involved in that, not just as an ISEE president, but also because the Harvard Six City study was a big target. And they made all these noises like they needed to have the data so they could show how the Harvard researchers got it wrong. Yeah, they just came out. They were just going to show how we did it wrong. So this was something that I first heard about actually at an ISEE meeting. And we got active in writing letters to various Congress people. And that is something that we're still doing. We have gotten very involved in taking the opportunities of the public statements that you can make before Congress, of just because they have to take that into account. It's law. They have to consider all of that. Because now Trump is gone, there's now an opportunity with the EPA, particularly because the EPA was so devastated during the Trump era, is that there's opportunities to help inform their policy. We have a meeting coming up actually already with just as a listening session, where somebody from the EPA is going to talk to the North American chapter representatives about what it is that we're concerned about. Those opportunities to get that message through, and we can do it through our universities, and we are, but it's also important to have it through another place where I think that we've made a difference. I don't know if anybody credits ISE for this, but I know that we were involved in it, is like in study section, which the group that reviews grants for the NIH, there was a lack of environmental reviewers. We really advocated for more environmental representation on those panels, and there definitely has been. The ISEE has a really great relationship with the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and that the project officers from NIEHS come regularly to our meetings, and they give talks and seminars and workshops, and they also really, they are such a cool agency at with NIH, because they really get to know their investigators really well. I think through ISEE is one place where that happened. I think that's also a really great perk of being part of ISEE, is you get to know the people at EPA. EPA also sends a lot of people because of the relationships, of being able to talk to people about what it is I'm studying and what it is they're studying. I can get new ideas, I can get new collaborators. Like I said, with that paper, the fact that kept getting beaten to everybody's head is that I think it spurred what they were doing in research and realizing what the next steps were that they could do. So I think of the field of air pollution as a whole, having a place where you can come together and talk about the key issues is really key.